Introduction. Where agency becomes real as we move into Chapter 2, we transition from understanding agency to actually putting it into practice. This is where most agents begin to make mistakes, not because they do not understand agency, but because they fail to properly establish and disclose it at the right time. In commercial real estate, the moment you begin advising, analyzing, or negotiating on behalf of a client, you are stepping into agency territory. Arizona law requires that this relationship be clearly disclosed, and failure to do so can create confusion, disputes, and disciplinary consequences. Under ACR 4-28-1101, agents must clearly communicate their role in the transaction, and under ARS Section 32 to 2153, failure to properly disclose agency can be considered a violation. This section focuses on how agency is formally introduced into the transaction through disclosure, specifically using the Real Estate Agency Disclosure and Election (READE) form. The purpose of agency disclosure is designed to ensure that all parties in a transaction understand who represents whom. This is not just a formality, it is a critical step in protecting both the client and the agent. In commercial real estate, where multiple brokers and parties may be involved, failing to clarify agency relationships can lead to significant misunderstandings. For example, a tenant may assume that a listing agent showing them a property is representing their interests, when in reality, that agent represents the landlord. Without proper disclosure, this misunderstanding can create an implied agency relationship, exposing the agent to unintended fiduciary duties. Arizona law emphasizes transparency, and disclosure is the mechanism that creates that clarity. It defines expectations, establishes boundaries, and protects against liability. The READE form, Application and Commercial Transactions. The Real Estate Agency Disclosure and Election (READE) form is the primary tool used in Arizona to establish and disclose agency relationships. While commonly associated with residential transactions, it is equally important in commercial real estate. The READE form outlines whether the agent represents the buyer, seller, landlord, tenant, or operates in a limited representation capacity. It also allows the client to acknowledge and consent to the type of representation being provided. In a commercial setting, this form becomes even more important due to the complexity of relationships involved. For example, in a multi-tenant retail leasing scenario, an agent may interact with several prospective tenants while representing the landlord. Proper use of the READE ensures that each party understands the agent's role from the beginning. This aligns with the expectations under ACR 4-28-1101 for clear and honest communication. Timing of disclosure, when it must happen. One of the most critical aspects of agency disclosure is timing. Disclosure must occur at the earliest practical opportunity, typically before or at the time of the first substantive discussion about the transaction. In commercial real estate, this often occurs during initial meetings, property tours, or early negotiations. Waiting too long to disclose agency can create the appearance of misrepresentation or deception. For example, if an agent provides detailed financial analysis or negotiation advice to a prospective buyer before disclosing that they represent the seller, that buyer may reasonably believe the agent is acting in their interest. This creates risk of implied agency and potential violation of ARS Section 32 to 2153. The key takeaway is simple: disclose early, disclose clearly, and document everything. Avoiding implied agency through proper disclosure, as discussed in Chapter 1, implied agency is one of the most dangerous situations an agent can find themselves in. It occurs when a party reasonably believes that the agent is representing them based on the agent's actions, even without a formal agreement. Proper use of the READE form is one of the most effective ways to prevent this. By clearly defining your role at the beginning of the relationship, you eliminate ambiguity and protect yourself from unintended fiduciary obligations. In commercial real estate, where conversations often involve strategy, pricing, and financial analysis, the risk of implied agency is significantly higher. Agents must be disciplined in how they communicate and ensure that their role is always clearly defined and understood. Broker supervision and documentation requirements agency disclosure is not just the responsibility of the individual agent, it is also a brokerage compliance issue. Under AC R 4-28-1103, brokers are required to supervise and ensure that proper documentation is maintained in every transaction. This includes verifying that agency disclosures are completed, signed, and retained in the transaction file. In commercial real estate, where transactions may span months or even years, maintaining accurate records is essential. Proper documentation not only ensures compliance, but also provides protection in the event of a dispute or audit. Brokers must have systems in place to monitor compliance, and agents must follow those systems consistently. Bringing it all together, clarity creates confidence. Agency disclosure is the moment where your role becomes clear, your responsibilities are defined, and your relationship with your client is formalized. It sets the tone for the entire transaction. When done correctly, it creates trust, reduces confusion, and protects all parties involved. When done incorrectly or not at all, it opens the door to liability, disputes, and disciplinary action. As we move forward in this chapter, you will see how agency disclosure ties directly into representation agreements, compensation structures, and negotiation strategies. The key is to treat disclosure not as a checkbox, but as a critical step in building a successful and compliant transaction. Online discussion: why is early agency disclosure critical in commercial real estate transactions? Answer: early disclosure prevents confusion, avoids implied agency, and ensures that all parties clearly understand representation from the beginning of the transaction. How does the READE form protect both the agent and the client? Answer: it clearly defines the agency relationship, establishes expectations, and provides written documentation that reduces the risk of disputes or misunderstandings. What risks arise when an agent fails to properly disclose their role? Answer: risks include implied agency, breach of fiduciary duty, misrepresentation claims, and potential disciplinary action under Arizona law.